The Request That Stopped the Stars. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. It was a place built for voices, for speeches, arguments, and the loud clash of ideas. The ceiling was a dome of crystal, showing the stars outside, and every seat in the circular chamber was filled. Leaders from hundreds of alien civilizations sat shoulder to shoulder, their eyes fixed on one figure in the center. It was the human representative. For years, humanity had stayed away from the council. They had refused meetings, ignored trade offers, and sent only short, polite replies to messages. Now, for the first time in decades, they had come in person. The galaxy wanted to know why. Council leader Zorath, a tall, silver-skinned being with eyes like polished stone, stepped forward. His voice carried across the hall, deep and careful. "On behalf of the Galactic Council," he said, "I come with an offer. We want peace. We want unity. Humanity is strong, too strong to be left apart. Will you join us in building a future without war?" Billions watched from across the stars. Every planet in the Council's reach had tuned in. The broadcast was live, translated into hundreds of languages. It was history in the making. The human representative, a woman in a dark uniform with a single silver pin on her collar, stood still. Her face showed no emotion. She didn't smile, didn't frown, didn't even blink. She just looked at Zorath. 1 second passed, then 2. A ripple of unease moved through the hall. The representatives of other species shifted in their seats. Some whispered to their aides. The silence stretched on, heavy and sharp. Finally, Zorath tried again. "Humanity," he said, his tone a little less steady now. "The galaxy needs your voice. We have had enough war. The human didn't answer. She didn't even raise her hand or shake her head. She simply turned, her eyes away, and stepped back. The hall froze. To many alien species, silence was worse than anger. A refusal to speak was a refusal to acknowledge, and from humanity, a race known for decisive words and quick action, it was almost unthinkable. A small alien delegate from the Cresson worlds whispered, "Does silence mean war?" Another hissed, "Are they planning something?" Zorath's jaw tightened. He had prepared for rejection. He had prepared for negotiation, but he had not prepared for nothing. He gave a small bow, turned away, and ended the meeting. The broadcast ended seconds later. Across the galaxy, the reaction was instant. On the icy moons of the Frau system, alien merchants closed their markets, afraid war was coming. In the warm seas of Malaris, the news screens played the human silent face on repeat, with flashing headlines. "Earth rejects peace? Human silence. What does it mean?" Some believed the humans were insulted. Others believed they were preparing for battle. A few thought it was a strategy, a way to make the council nervous, to gain an advantage. On the edge of the council's territory, in a dusty bar lit by red lanterns, a lone alien diplomat named Kareth sat with his drink, replaying the scene on a small screen. He watched the human stillness over and over. Kareth had studied humans before. He had learned their history, their languages, even their jokes. Silence, he knew, could mean many things to them. It could be respect, it could be refusal, or it could be a warning. And Kareth had a feeling it was the last one. He drained his glass, set it down, and sent a short message to his ship. Prepare for immediate departure to Earth. If the Council was going to understand what humanity's silence meant, someone had to ask them directly. And Kareth knew one thing for certain. Whatever the humans were planning, they were not going to explain it in the Council chamber. Far above him, in the endless black between the stars, ships were already moving. They bore no flags, no identifying marks. Only those who knew human engineering could tell where they came from. The galaxy had asked for peace. Humanity had answered with silence. And somewhere beyond the edges of mapped space, that silence was about to make the stars tremble. Whispers across the galaxy. In the days after the meeting, the galaxy could talk about nothing else. On the crystal moon of Valera, merchants whispered behind closed shop doors. On the stormy plains of Bragoth, warlords sat in dark halls sharpening weapons. Even in the floating gardens of Lura Prime, where politics were banned, the news spread like wildfire. Everyone had seen the broadcast. Everyone had seen the human woman stand there without saying a single word. Some believed it was arrogance. Others called it a threat. A few even claimed it was a sign of pity, that humans saw the council as too broken to fix. On every world, alien news channels replayed the footage. Analysts paused the image, pointing at the human's eyes, her posture, the way she breathed. "Here," one expert said, "you can see the moment she makes her decision." Another shook his head. "No, this was planned long before she arrived." But no one agreed on what it meant. Kareth, the alien diplomat, traveled toward Earth in his small, sleek ship. He had been to the human homeworld once before, many years ago, but that was in a time of trade and cautious friendship. Now the journey felt different. The stars seemed sharper, colder. As he approached the Sol system, he noticed something odd. There were human ships everywhere, not just near Earth, but scattered along the approach routes, silent and unmarked. They did not hail him. They did not ask for identification. They simply watched as he passed. When Kareth's ship finally entered Earth's orbit, he expected chaos, protests, soldiers in the streets, a planet preparing for war. Instead, the cities below looked peaceful. Lights glittered like constellations. Civilian shuttles moved calmly between stations. Children played in parks. It was normal. Too normal. Landing in New Geneva, Earth's political capital, Kareth was met by a single official, a quiet man named Commander Ellis. His uniform was plain, with no rank markings, and his voice was polite but distant. "You are welcome here," Ellis said, "but your stay will be brief. The Council's request has been noted. There is nothing more to discuss." Kareth tilted his head. "Nothing more? The galaxy is waiting for an answer." Ellis only smiled. "They will get it." The words were calm, but Kareth felt a chill. He had spent his life reading between the lines of diplomacy, and this was no ordinary delay. Over the next 2 days, Kareth walked the streets, trying to read the mood of the people. Yet no one seemed to care about the council. No protests, no speeches, no debates in public squares. When he asked questions, humans changed the subject. Shopkeepers spoke about weather, students talked about sports, even officials avoided the topic. It was as if the silence wasn't just the representative's choice. It was the whole planet's. One evening in a small dockside cafe, Kareth sat sipping a bitter human drink. At the next table, 2 pilots in dark jackets were speaking in low voices. He caught only fragments at first. "Phase 2. Deployment begins tomorrow. Keep the channels cold. No transmissions." Kareth's spines prickled. This was military talk. The younger pilot glanced around nervously. "What if the council finds out?" The older one smirked. "They won't. Not until it's over." Kareth lowered his eyes, pretending not to listen, but his mind was racing. What was Phase 2? Why all this secrecy? That night, he stood at the edge of the New Geneva spaceport. In the darkness, massive silhouettes of starships loomed, their hulls gleaming under floodlights. Workers moved quickly, loading crates and sealed containers. No insignias, no visible weapons. Yet Kareth could feel it. These ships were not for trade. He took out his communicator and began to record a report for the Galactic Council. But before he could finish, a shadow fell over him. Commander Ellis stood there, hands behind his back. His voice was calm, but his eyes were cold. "It would be best," Ellis said softly, "if you didn't ask too many questions." Kareth swallowed hard. "And if I do?" Ellis smiled faintly. "Then you'll have your answer sooner than you think." Far above, in silent formation, human fleets began to move. Not toward enemy space, not toward council territory, but somewhere else entirely. Into a sector of space no alien dared to enter. The galaxy had asked for peace. Humanity had given no words. And now Kareth was starting to understand why. The meeting no one was meant to hear. Kareth did not sleep that night. The words Phase 2 kept circling in his mind like restless shadows. The next morning, before sunrise, he stood hidden in the shadows of the New Geneva spaceport's maintenance bay. Through the narrow gap between two cargo containers, he watched the docking platform below. 4 humans stood together, speaking in low voices. They weren't wearing the shiny uniforms of parade soldiers. Their jackets were scuffed, boots dusty, and their movements sharp and quick. Kareth recognized one of them, Commander Ellis. "Final ships depart in 6 hours," Ellis said. "All cargo is secure, no transmissions beyond command frequency." Another man asked, "And the council? They'll think we're mobilizing for war." Ellis's voice was flat. "Good. That will keep them out of the way." Kareth's spine stiffened. So it was a trick. The silence, the secrecy, the ships. But why? The third human, a tall woman with short black hair, leaned forward. "Never forget the accord," she said. "We learned our lesson the hard way. No speeches, no warnings, just action." Kareth felt a flicker of recognition. The accord. It was a name from old diplomatic files, a disaster decades ago when the Galactic Council had promised to protect human colonies from an enemy fleet, and then abandoned them at the last moment to save other worlds. Millions had died. Humans had never forgiven the Council, and maybe they never would. Ellis continued, his tone calm but sharp. "Our mission is clear. We don't answer to them. We don't broadcast our plans. We do what needs to be done." Kareth held his breath, straining to hear more. The black-haired woman asked, "What about the refugees?" Ellis's eyes narrowed. "They will be safe before anyone even knows we were there." Kareth's mind raced. Refugees? What refugees? There had been no mention of any crisis in recent council meetings. Then, without warning, Ellis turned his head slightly, his gaze sweeping the docking bay. Kareth shrank back into the shadows, his heart pounding. He waited. Silence. Then, slowly the humans walked away, their voices fading. That night, Kareth made his choice. He could not just report back. He needed to see where these ships were going. Under the cover of darkness, he slipped into his ship and set his scanners to track the departing human fleet. Their engines burned cold, barely visible against the void, but Kareth was skilled at following without being noticed. Hours passed. Stars slid past like silent witnesses. And then, he saw it. A massive wall of dead space. No signals, no beacons, no maps. Even the Council's star charts marked it only with a warning symbol. Unsurveyed, hazardous, avoid. The human fleet was heading straight into it. As Kareth followed, his ship's instruments began to flicker, radiation levels rose slightly, sensor readings blurred. It was the kind of place most pilots avoided at all costs, but the humans, they moved with precision, as if they knew every shadow, every hidden path. Finally, at the very edge of his scanner range, Kareth saw shapes in the darkness. Not human ships, alien vessels. Dozens of them. Many were broken, scarred, their engines dead. Some still glowed faintly with life support systems. Kareth's eyes widened. They were refugee ships, old, damaged, drifting for years. And then it hit him. The Council had abandoned these people long ago, left them in a dying sector when the war shifted elsewhere. The humans had found them. Before Kareth could process it, the human fleet moved in perfect formation, their lights cutting through the dark. They began towing the broken alien ships, sending boarding parties with medical supplies, food, and water. No speeches, no cameras, no announcements to the galaxy, just silent rescue. Kareth felt his throat tighten. He had expected to find weapons being readied for war, not a fleet saving the forgotten. And suddenly the meaning of the human silence became clearer. It wasn't a threat. It was protection. But if the Council found out, things could turn deadly very fast. A galaxy on edge. Kareth had seen many political storms in his lifetime, but this was different. It was faster, more dangerous. By the time he slipped back into Council space, whispers had turned into alarms. Every major news network broadcast flashing maps showing the human fleet's movements, Red arrows pointed into the uncharted sector, and grim-faced analysts warned of military escalation without precedent. None of them knew the truth. On the glittering city world of Varel, shopkeepers closed their doors early, muttering about the coming war. On the volcanic mines of Gorth, soldiers polished their armor in silence. The fear was spreading faster than light, and the council fed it. At an emergency meeting, council leader Zorath stood before the gathered delegates, his voice firm. Humanity is acting without oversight. We cannot assume their intentions are peaceful. Their silence is a weapon, and we must prepare for the worst. The chamber erupted. Some shouted for sanctions, others for a preemptive strike. A few demanded to send a larger fleet to follow the humans. Only one voice, soft but clear, broke through the noise. Arena. Arena was young, barely past the first cycle of her diplomatic career. Her golden eyes and calm tones stood out in the chaos. With respect, Leader Zorath, she said, this is the same mistake we made before. We judge without knowing. We talk without seeing. If we want answers, send me to ask them. Laughter rippled through the chamber. And you think they'll speak to you? An older delegate mocked. Arena didn't flinch. Yes, because I studied with them, on Earth. That silenced the room for a moment. Zorath's eyes narrowed. You have personal ties to humanity? Arena nodded. I do. And if anyone can understand their silence, it is someone they once trusted. The vote was quick. By the slimmest margin, the council agreed. Arena would go. Her journey to Earth was quiet, but not without tension. She saw patrol ships shadowing her from a distance, council vessels ready to pounce if she learned anything suspicious. The unspoken order was clear. Find proof of war. When she arrived in New Geneva, Arena was met not by Commander Ellis, but by a young man named Jonas Hale. He was tall, with a calm expression and the kind of stillness she remembered from her student days. You've come a long way, Jonas said softly, but you're too late to stop what's begun. Arena frowned. What has begun? Jonas looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing the risk of answering. Then, instead of speaking, he gestured for her to follow. They walked to the edge of the orbital dock. Below them, the curved hulls of massive ships gleamed in the dim light. Yet Arena noticed something strange. No weapons, no launch tubes, no fighter bays. Instead, she saw rows of sealed compartments marked with the symbols of food, medicine, and shelter units. Her eyes widened. These aren't warships. Jonas didn't smile, but there was a glint of something, pride maybe, in his eyes. We don't speak because words can be twisted. We act because action cannot be lied about. Arena felt her throat tighten. The council thinks you're preparing for war. You could have told them the truth. Jonas shook his head. And trusted them not to stop us? No. The council abandoned those people once. They would again. That night, Arena stood alone at the viewport of her guest quarters, watching the stars. She remembered the day she left Earth years ago, waving goodbye to human friends who always spoke with fire in their voices. Now they fought with silence, and it was somehow louder than anything she'd ever heard. She knew the council would never believe her without proof, but if she gave them that proof, the humans' mission could be destroyed. And in that moment, Arena realized something that made her stomach twist. The humans weren't just saving lives, they were forcing the galaxy to see its own shame. Far beyond in the dead sector, Kareth's ship still followed the human fleet. He watched as another crippled alien vessel was pulled into formation, its crew waving weakly through cracked viewports. Neither Kareth nor Arena knew it yet, but the silence was almost over. And when humanity finally chose to speak, the stars themselves would tremble. The destination, no one expected. Kareth had followed fleets before, but never like this. The humans moved with a precision that was unsettling. No chatter on open channels, no flare of recognition codes, not even the usual course corrections that other fleets made when traveling long distances. It was as if they had carved their path into the void long before they left Earth. Days passed in silent pursuit. The deeper they traveled into the dead sector, the more the stars thinned. Vast regions of darkness stretched between lonely points of light. The radiation grew heavier here, distorting sensors and blurring scans. This was a place no sane captain entered willingly. And then, Kareth saw them. Not the humans. He had seen them every day since leaving Earth, but the shapes ahead. Dozens of broken alien ships drifting aimlessly in the void like ghost carcasses. Some hulls were split open, spilling frozen debris into space. Others still had faint lights flickering within, proof that someone, or something, remained alive inside. These were not enemy vessels. These were survivors. The humans slowed. Massive cruisers extended docking arms, linking with crippled ships that had not moved in decades. Boarding teams in white and orange suits poured inside, carrying crates of food, water, and medical supplies. Kareth adjusted his view, zooming in on one rescue. The boarding team broke through a jammed hatch, and the first thing he saw were small alien children, thin, eyes sunken, staring in shock at their rescuers. The humans knelt, offering blankets and food without saying a word. He felt something twist inside him. The council had spoken of the unreachable zone as a graveyard, a place too dangerous to send aid, but here humanity was, carving through that darkness without hesitation. A second fleet arrived from a different vector, larger than the first. Kareth recognized some of their ships from old military records, heavy carriers, fast attack destroyers. But instead of weapons, their hulls were loaded with evacuation pods. He scanned for any sign of war equipment. There was none. Still, the silence puzzled him. Why not broadcast this to the galaxy? Why let the council believe they were preparing for battle? It was they. And that Kareth caught something on his encrypted receiver, a faint, low-frequency transmission from one of the human command ships. It was a woman's voice, calm and cold. Maintain blackout. Council cannot know our position. If they learn, they will order a halt to save face. These people are ours now. Kareth froze. Ours now? It sounded like ownership. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized the truth. The humans weren't claiming the refugees as property, they were claiming responsibility. On the other side of the sector, Arena's own small diplomatic vessel arrived. She had convinced Jonas Hale to let her see the mission firsthand, and now she stood on the bridge of a massive human carrier. The air smelled faintly of metal and ozone. Every crew member moved with quiet efficiency. The only sounds were the beeps of control panels and the occasional calm order. Jonas pointed toward the main viewport. That's the last of them. 43 ships, 37,000 survivors, left here by your council's decision 32 years ago. Arena felt her stomach knot. The council said it was impossible to reach them, that the area was unstable. Jonas cut her off with a glance. It wasn't impossible. It just wasn't profitable. Over the next hours, she saw what Kareth had been watching from afar. Injured aliens carried to med bays, children given warm meals, whole families placed into clean quarters aboard the carriers. No reporters, no political speeches, just work. And she began to understand the silence. If the council had known, they would have tried to claim credit or block the operation altogether to avoid admitting their failure. Humanity wasn't just saving lives. They were exposing the council without ever speaking a word. But while the rescues continued, the rest of the galaxy was reaching a breaking point. On distant worlds, alien leaders demanded to know why the human fleet had vanished into dead space. Military commanders argued for a preemptive strike, fearing an ambush. Propaganda machines chirps, net out images of aggressive human expansion, even as those same humans were pulling starving children from wrecked ships. War was close. All it would take was one wrong move. And Kareth, watching from the edge of the operation, realized something chilling. If the galaxy fired first, the humans would not stay silent forever. The truth spreads. At first, the Council's version of events held strong. The public was told the human fleets had entered forbidden space for unknown and possibly hostile purposes. News anchors repeated the phrase until it became a warning, a shadow on every world. But the truth was harder to kill than they thought. It started as a single image, a grainy still shot from inside a damaged refugee vessel, a human officer kneeling beside a starving alien child wrapping them in a thermal blanket. The picture was blurry, but the emotion was clear. It spread like fire. By the time the council tried to suppress it, more footage appeared. Silent videos of human crews unloading crates of food, carrying the wounded, repairing crippled ships. And with every new clip, the official story began to crumble. On the frozen colonies of Rythos, miners gathered in mess halls to watch the images. Many had family who'd been written off by the council in old wars. On the desert trade moons of Ketharis, merchants who once feared human expansion now whispered, "Maybe they're not the villains we were told." Even in the polished halls of the council, the mood shifted. Some delegates grew restless, sensing their own people turning against them. Others doubled down, calling the videos fabrications and propaganda. But every denial only made the images spread faster. Arena watched all of this unfold from the deck of a human carrier. She saw crews working without pause, hands blistered, eyes tired, yet no one complained. They didn't look for recognition. Thus, I didn't seek praise. One night, she asked Jonas Hale why they hadn't spoken publicly yet. Jonas was quiet for a long time before answering. "Because the council will twist our words into a game. This isn't a game. These are lives. Once the last one is safe, then, and only then, we will speak." His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Arena realized then that silence wasn't weakness here. It was control. Humanity was writing its own story, on its own terms, and no one could interrupt. Far away, Kareth faced his own choice. He had recorded hours of footage from the edge of the operation, undeniable proof of what the humans were doing. If he transmitted it to the galaxy now, he could break the Council's lies wide open. But he also knew what would happen next. The Council might send fleets to assist, which in truth meant taking control. That could slow the operation and risk more lives. For the first time in his diplomatic career, Kareth hesitated to tell the truth. The Council, feeling pressure, finally made a bold move. A private message was sent to the human flagship. It was short, and it carried only one request. "We ask for a private meeting, no media, no audience, just us." Jonas showed the message to the human fleet commander. She read it, set the datapad down, and said simply, "They're not ready for the truth, but they will get it." That evening, in the shadow of a dying star, the human flagship changed course. Not toward home, not toward war, but toward the meeting place the Council had chosen. The silence was nearly over, and when humanity finally broke it, the galaxy would never be the same. The silent reply that shook the stars. The meeting was held in a chamber far from the Grand Council Hall. No cameras, no journalists, only a long table, dim lights, and a tension so heavy it felt like the air itself had weight. At one end sat the council delegation, leader Zorath in his polished silver robes, flanked by senior envoys and military advisors. At the other end sat Thais, a human representative, the same woman who had stood in silence weeks ago, her uniform as plain as before. Between them, a wide emptiness. Zorath began, his voice measured but tight. "Humanity's actions have caused fear across the galaxy. Entire sectors believe you prepare for war. You have entered restricted space without approval. We ask, no, we demand, an explanation." The human did not answer right away. Her eyes moved slowly across the alien faces before her, as if memorizing each one. The silence stretched until some of the envoys shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was quiet, but every syllable was sharp. "You ask why we were silent. Because peace is not made with speeches. Peace is made with action." Zorath leaned forward. "And what action do you speak of?" The human slid a small device across the table. A hollow field bloomed into life. Images of the rescued. Alien children wrapped in blankets. Families eating their first real meal in years. Ships once broken, now moving under their own power. No music, no narration, just the truth. The room went still. One council envoy muttered, This This is impossible. Those ships were beyond reach. The human's gaze turned to him. Beyond your reach, not ours. Her words cut like a blade. Zorath's hands tightened on the table. Why hide this? Why let us think you were preparing for war? The human leaned forward slightly. Because if we told you, you would have tried to stop us. You would have feared being shamed more than you cared about saving them. So we said nothing. And in that silence, we did what you never could. Arena, seated at the side as an observer, felt a chill run through her. She had known the truth for days, but hearing it spoken aloud made it heavier, sharper. Kareth, invited at the last moment, met the human's eyes and saw something there, to not arrow, Gantz, not cruelty, but a fierce, unshakable resolve. Zorath tried to recover. You have embarrassed the council before the galaxy. The human stood. No, and we showed them what leadership looks like. She walked to the door, then paused and looked back one last time. We don't need your approval to do what's right. We never did. And with that, she left the chamber. The following day, the truth went public. Every rescued family, every repaired ship, every act of silent aid released in unedited footage across the galaxy. World by world, the Council's authority cracked. Citizens demanded change. Delegates who had once mocked humanity now sought their alliance. Humanity never made a victory speech. They didn't need to. Their silence had already spoken louder than any words. And in the years that followed, the galaxy remembered that day, not as the day the Council pleaded for peace, but as the day humanity's silence shook the stars.